one of them being what Jocko Willink called the information battle. And, especially early on, but still I'd argue that like they're losing that battle, Israel is. And it's shocking to me because, it's a well-oiled machine. Like it's a very, like, I've heard you talk about Mossad in terms of like their capabilities and all that. How are they being so sloppy with it? Like it's unbelievable in terms of like either on social media, is it like a fog of war kind of thing?
So there's a number of things happening all at once, right? So first, yes, there's an information war. And then let's just call that layer one of the multi-layer cake, right? And then on top of that, you also have this complete change in the information space compared to the last time Israel and Palestine had any kind of hot conflict, right? I mean, we've had major changes in the information space in terms of available information, the speed of information, disinformation, misinformation. It changes every 2 to 3 years. And then you have another layer on top of that that's tied specifically to the current leadership in Israel, Netanyahu, who, I mean, has been recently reelected back to being the prime minister of Israel after 2 other prime ministers both held terms of less than a year. So massive turnover in the leadership of Israeli politics. And it's turned over to Netanyahu, who is not a popular leader. There's a huge contingent of Israelis that don't like Netanyahu. The man's on trial. He's still under investigation for corruption, for misinformation, for abuse of power. Like, he's essentially the Israeli version of Donald Trump.
But I think less popular. I believe it's a 90% disapproval rating right now.
Absolutely. But what I'm getting at is like, he stands active charges.
Yeah.
And he's the prime minister of Israel at this moment in time. So you got all these complexities happening at once. So, and then on top of all that, you do have the traditional fog of war where there's just so much going on. Nobody knows all the information. When you have that kind of concoction, that kind of cocktail of disaster, that's how bad decisions get made for sure. But I think what's really important to understand about what's happening in Israel right now is that Israel is in a position where they are, to your words exactly, they are losing. They may be winning in terms of having more bombs. They may be winning in terms of more airstrikes, and they may be winning in terms of military might, but they are losing international support, losing public support. They're even losing American support. And they don't have many friends anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So for them to lose support of their few allies is a very big deal. Meanwhile, in the Arab world, which is a massive world that nobody knows about, especially not if you're a Westerner, the Arab world is collectively rallying behind Palestine. And more of the Western world is collectively rallying behind Palestine, finally coming to terms with the fact that this is a group of people who have been oppressed, rejected, discriminated against. Their human rights have been violated for decades. But before, there was never the kind of information superhighway where people could learn about it quickly and become up to speed on the content, on the conflict itself and what had happened in Palestine. Now it's there. And I mean, you're seeing public opinion about Israel change on a day-to-day basis. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. My dad's plugged in on like the TikTok world, like looking at kind of what's like public opinion, especially in the US. And it's changed so much. Like he's talking about, people in the center of this country who have always sided with Israel because that's what the media tells them. And people now, being aware of what's actually going on a level that's never like is this, well, I guess Ukraine and Russia, but this is, I guess, one of the biggest conflicts in this social media age where there was misinformation in the past, but now people are realizing this isn't the whole picture. Like October 7th, was obviously a terrible thing. And I wouldn't condone any civilian killing of any kind, but like, it doesn't start on the 7th. Like This is
exactly
late 19th century Zionism political movement onwards to 48. Even like one of my best friends, for example, we were talking about this on the phone, and like he grew up in the United States, has no, claim to any of those Middle Eastern regions or anything. So, I don't blame him for not understanding the history of the region. But, me growing up with Palestinian heritage, I know about the history, and I've read and I listen, and I try to hire my best to stay up to date. And, the 1948 like Nakba is like a to me was like, I thought everyone knew that. It's like, that's common knowledge. But he's like, oh, I didn't even know that happened in 1948. And then I'm like, well, do you know what happened in this year and that year? And then these, assassinations and all this. And he's like, oh, dude, I had no idea. Thank you for telling me. Like, there's so many different examples of that. And it blows my mind.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is, it's, if you don't understand history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
And that's a famous adage that's very true and very real. But we live in a world where the reality is most people don't know history. And when it comes to really nuanced history, we really don't know history. Because of the information age that we live in, we get a benefit of not having to be historians in order to understand current tragedy. All you have to do is look at what's happening right now, unfolding on screen in front of you. And you can see the tragedy that's happening right now in the Gaza Strip. You can count the bodies, and you can see the difference between 1,400 dead Israelis on October 7th and 13,000 dead Palestinians yesterday. Those are hugely different numbers. That's 10 times the amount of death, not even counting who it is that's actually paying the penalty of death, right? Women and children being 2/3 of the people who are dying. You don't have to have the context of history to understand that this is wrong. And then you have the UN talking about war crimes, not some random country accusing war crimes, the United Nations.
Yeah.
That's a conglomerate of countries that are basically seen as a fair and balanced force, a fair and balanced opinion of what's happening on a national and international scale.
And not just now, but in the past, in terms of illegal actions with settlers and apartheid and occupation and essentially martial law. Like, this isn't like just a recent thing, to your point.
Yeah, exactly right. And again, what's nice is that you don't have to have been a historian, because now once you see what's happening, it's just a search away.
Yeah.
It's just a search away to find out that there are actual human rights violations that have been happening in the Gaza Strip and West Bank for decades. Apartheid is alive and well. Apartheid. People thought that ended in South Africa. It's alive and well right now in the nation state of Israel, in these sections that have been set aside for Palestinians. It's a tragedy, but I think the larger tragedy is that the West, specifically the United States, you play pro football in the United States. I am an American veteran. I'm an American former CIA officer. We are as red, white, and blue apple pie and hot dogs as it gets, right? And we grew up in a country that really can't tell the difference between an Israeli and a Jew. They think they're the same thing. So to be anti-Israeli, our country as a culture thinks that if you don't support Israel, you are an anti-Semite. You don't support Judaism.
Yeah.
Two completely different things.
Well, also Semites are Arabs too, by definition of the word, which people don't really realize that.
Because again, going back to the culture of our country is at its core, we really do struggle with anti-Islamicism. We don't understand the Muslim faith. We don't understand Islam. We don't want to understand Islam. The only time that you really hear the word Islam inside the United States is when you hear Islamic extremism.
Right.
People don't realize outside of the borders of the United States, even inside the borders of the United States, there are giant, healthy Muslim communities that are doing amazing things. Outside of the United States, the Muslim world is a massive, massive force of international opinion, international aid, international guidance. It's just incredible. But we are an insulated country, and we happen to also be the world's wealthiest country. So when you pair incredible wealth with insulated information, you end up having this perfect recipe for ignorance, global and international ignorance. And that's where we are, and that's what we're continually fed by a media apparatus that's essentially a for-profit business. So the media is no longer interested in telling us what's actually happening. They're interested in telling us what we want to hear so that we keep clicking, keep watching, keep scrolling, and they keep earning money.